He is the second oldest surviving dramatic playwright and is considered by many the greatest ever. Although he wrote more than 100 plays, only 7 survive to our age. Nonetheless, Sophocles' psychological explorations, his moral conundrums, and his insinuations about the social and political controversies of his time have been influential and admired across millennia. Sophocles Ajax. This play begins with Athena hovering over Odysseus as she praises him for his wits. Odysseus recognizes her voice and praises her in return. Then he asks her why there are so many bloody farm animal corpses littering the ground. Yes, the scene must have included a lot of such props. Athena explains that this is all the work of Ajax, which prompts Odysseus to ask,
what can have roused him to a work so wild?
The goddess answers,
his grievous anger for Achilles' arms.
Odysseus is shocked, especially when Zeus's daughter clarifies that Ajax meant to kill him and the other Argive captains and would have done it if she, the goddess, had not intervened. So, as you might imagine, it truly is important to know the backstory beforehand, as the play does not begin with an explanation of it. To be brief, after Achilles' death, the captains of the Argive army voted to give Odysseus, as rewards for his wisdom, the armor that Hephaestus, the god of smithworking, had crafted for Achilles. You might recall that the metalworking god gives this to Achilles in fulfillment of a favor to his mother. Either way, Ajax thought that he should be given the armor because he was the greatest warrior still left alive. As a result, Ajax, in his envy and frustration, decides to kill the other Argive captains. However, Athena, always on the lookout against threats to Odysseus, gives Ajax the illusion that a group of camp animals, such as goats, ewe, and cows, are in fact the men he is after. Most noteworthy is how Athena tells Odysseus to rejoice in how Ajax, now his enemy, is suffering madness. Peculiarly in my mind, Odysseus responds commendably by not wanting to take pleasure in such a thing. Athena says to Odysseus,
Hush, hush. Be not so timorous, but persevere. Is laughter not sweetest over a foe?
The goddess continues, and intending to entertain Odysseus, she plays with deluded Ajax as she speaks to the blood-cover man as if she were his matron and aide. Ajax, not realizing the reality that surrounds him, greets her cheerfully and praises her. The highlight of the exchange occurs when she asks the man about Odysseus. Ajax answers,
He sits within, dear lady, to my joy, bound, for I mean him not just yet to die.
He goes on to describe the torture he intends for the poor goat that he perceives as Odysseus. At this moment, I was not sure what the moral message of the play would be. Certainly, Odysseus does not wish to partake in what could be called an unvirtuous and detestable mockery. I would like to construct an aphorism and inversion of the claim that the merriest laughter is that which is had on, or about, an enemy. Perhaps.
When mocking the vanquished, the winner diminishes the pride of his victory.
Continuing, Odysseus says,
I know of none, but, though he hates me sore, I pity him, poor mortal, thus chained fast to a wild and cruel fate, weighing not so much. His fortune is mine own, for now I feel, all we who live are but an empty show, an idle pageant of a shadowy dream.
I cannot help but wonder, but alas, life may be too short for the question, what makes some, only a few I guess, think as Odysseus does. Athena responds that she is attempting to give a lesson, teaching through what seems to us mortals as tragic irony. I thought about saving this to the end, but I feel compelled to deal with it now. Giving as much merit to Sophocles, if what I myself opine is correct, then he must be, to a certain extent, excusing Athena's behavior. After all, the flaw with theistic fate is that if fortune frowns upon you, then it must be that you are worthy of misfortune. That it must be a punishment of the gods. So, by excusing Athena's behavior, well, Sophocles is leaving the door open to that interpretation. More on this later, as Odysseus tenuously disagrees. I found this very curious. Both characters leave and the chorus enters. It sings of having heard about the shameful deeds. It pleads that
Odysseus and the tyrant lords suggest a forged tale.
tyrant lords. I tell you, some argued in favor of a democratic change in the Iliad. The chorus also asks if it be the deed of various gods such as
Artemis, Zeus' cruel daughter.
or Ares, the vengeful god of war. In this theme, the chorus basically confirms my aforementioned insight. People interpret misfortune, especially sickness, most of all mental sickness, as a deed from the gods. Very curious. Then Tecmessa, Ajax's wife, enters the scene. I should mention that this is supposed to be the wife he gathered or gained through the conflict. Yet, that does not mean she does not love him. Furthermore, they have an infant child together. She answers the chorus inquiry by telling them that some madness had struck her husband. She explains, in gruesome detail, what happened to her husband, which introduces a conceptual or moral dilemma.
And now that reason's light returns, new sorrow in his spirit burns.
She continues by posing the following question.
If choice were given you, would you rather choose, hurting your friends, yourself to feel delight, or share with them in one commingled pain?
Meaning, while Ajax's madness raged, only those that cared for him suffered. Now that he has regained his awareness, they all suffer.
Have we not double for our single woe?
The chorus then asks Tecmessa to describe or explain how this misfortune came about. As she explains, she says a phrase Ajax told her regarding her complaints, a phrase wherein I suspect one or more aphorisms may be buried.
He, with words well known to women's ears, checked me, the silent partner is the best.
Think about it, perhaps an inversion of the implied value. Who is the truly best partner? To whom is the best? Once again, Tecmessa describes the gruesome deed in detail until the point when reason returns to the man and, covered in blood and gore, he howls and deplores his own actions. Soon enough, Ajax himself is heard crying in the room besides. The scenario opens and Ajax is revealed, presumably in a captivatingly deplorable condition. You can imagine. Ajax complains profusely about the laughter of his enemies, of those he intended to kill. His wife implores him not to speak such, and the chorus tells him not to lament what is already past and may no longer be changed. Ajax responds by insinuating his future deed, that he will kill himself, but more on that later. In his lamentations, he makes clear that he knows the culprit behind his condition.
Stern daughter of the highest, with baneful eye, even as my arm descended, baffled me, and hurled upon my soul a frenzied plague, to stain my hand with these dumb victims' blood.
Further, he explains or justifies his hopelessness or lack of will.
Now, what remains? Heaven hates me, 'tis evident, the Grecian host abhors me, and my enemy is all this country around our campsite.
In other words, foes hate him, his friends scorn him, and even divinity is against him. It is truly a deplorable condition. I must say, this play is good. Ajax proceeds to weigh his options and concludes that
Shame on the wight who, when beset with ill, cares to live on in misery unrelieved.
from this, his wife also laments. She explains that she was born a wealthy free woman and that now she is a captive. I do not know the whole story behind her, but it is clear that she is a captured Trojan. She, therefore, begs Ajax not to leave her and their infant child, defenseless to the mistreatment of the other Argives who would not only see her as a trophy of war worthy of defilement and abuse, but on top of that the former wife of their new enemy. Ajax responds by merely giving her some instructions. First, he has the child brought in. He says to the boy things such as,
Be luckier than thy father, boy. But else, be like him, and thy life will not be low. One thing even now I envy thee, that none of all this misery pierces to thy mind, for life is sweetest in the void of sense, ere thou know joy or sorrow.
There are many aphorisms buried there. In the end, Ajax tells his wife that his brother Teucer will help them. that his armor is not to be taken by any of the Argives, that she must preserve it for the child, and he mentions his parents back in Greece who will take them in. The chorus sings briefly, and when they return, Ajax is carrying a sword. He mentions a line that I quickly molded into.
As there is no permanence that interminable time will not change, is there not also no truth that will not grow false?
I must say, this one is quite the gem. Ajax sends Tecmessa away, and the scene changes. A messenger bringing news enters. He says the seer Calchas has foretold that if Ajax is not kept guarded, he will end his own life. I do not quite understand why the chorus and Tecmessa act surprised at this. The messenger tells them that he has been sent by Teucer, Ajax's brother, who himself is on the way to aid. The three set out to search for Ajax, and the scene changes to a secluded spot in the woods. Here Ajax, alone, says his farewell words. Among these, he says things like,
"Let some voice bear Teucer the ill news, that none but he may lift my body, newly fallen in death, about my bleeding sword, ere I be spied by some of those who hate me, and be flung to dogs and vultures for an outcast prey."
I make a special mention of these lines because they foreshadow the coming, last, theme of the play, how to treat the body of the rival or enemy. It was the moral virtue and expectation among the Greeks to let the defeated enemy recover and properly bury or burn the corpses of their fallen. This is what civilized people did. As the search party searches, Tecmessa finds the corpse of Ajax. He buried his sword upright on the earth and let himself fall on it. This scene is depicted in many vase paintings. His wife covers him with a mantle, and she says,
Yet such the mischief Zeus resistless made, Athena hath planned to make Odysseus glad.
In effect, this last theme of the play is a derivation of the first. Not to mention that this and subsequent negative and derogatory commentaries towards the gods, in particular Athena, are surprising. Tecmessa vents, directly and explicitly, against those that would take pleasure in their rival's misfortune. Teucer, the brother, enters and laments. He asks for the child of Ajax when he says,
"Go bring him hither, lest some enemy's hand snatch him, as when the lion whelp is taken from the widow lioness."
Then begins readying the burial until Menelaus arrives, decreeing it against his wishes, his law, that Ajax should be buried. The king of Sparta argues that Ajax must be punished for his intentions, because had divinity not stopped him, he would have murdered many allies. I guess this is another moral conundrum of the play, though perhaps not explored extensively. Should one be punished for intention, for will, or desire? In the end, Menelaus threatens Teucer by saying,
"Burying thy brother thou be burrowing thine own grave."
The chorus makes the moral dilemma and theme of the play explicit as they say,
Menelaus, make not thy philosophy a platform whence to insult the valiant dead.
Teucer does not submit or comply, rather he brings in the Athenian spirit. As one would hope, Sophocles proves a lover of democracy. I tell you, once again, there must have been talk about changing the Iliad. Teucer basically accuses Menelaus of acting the role of tyrant. Another, milder interpretation may follow from lines such as,
"Sparta, not we, shall buckle to thy sway."
I guess at this point Sparta is the enemy and Menelaus is a Spartan, thus he must be the bad, anti-democratic villain. Yet, the opposers of my interpretation must admit the curious nature of the following exchange.
"For thy proved knavery, coining votes in the court.
The judges voted, he ne'er lost through me."
Guilt hiding guile wears often fairest front.
So, in Sophocles' version of the myth, the captains voted on the treatment of Ajax's body. The entire idea is fit only to a democratic society. By the way, the last mentioned line is an almost completely crafted aphorism. Teucer throws Menelaus off the stage. I can imagine the audience cheering, and Tecmessa enters with the child, Eurystheus. Teucer guides the child through the ceremony, which includes all three cutting a lock of hair to place on his grave. I really like that detail. I believe I will do so in my own personal future. After a brief song by the chorus, Agamemnon enters. The King of Kings refers to Ajax and Teucer as slaves. What ensues is basically an argument on political philosophy, on the social utility or not of rebellion. Agamemnon says,
"Kick the award that passed by voice of the majority in the court, and either pelt us with rude calumnies. Howbeit, these ways will never help to build the wholesome order of established law. Not by height or breadth the perfect man is known, but wisdom gives chief power in all the world."
Certainly, no objection could be raised to the last sentence, but Agamemnon follows up by saying that Teucer needs to bring freeborn advocates to plead his case. That he, Agamemnon, does not care to hear Teucer's barbarian tongue. I do not know why Ajax and Teucer are regarded as barbarians. They would have been from Salamis, the Athenian island. Nonetheless, this could be very edgy political satire or commentary. After all, slaves and foreigners had no legal power, even in Athenian democracy. The flaw that present-day oligarchs are quick to point out. I interpret it as satire or social commentary because Teucer is clearly the good guy. He reminds Agamemnon of how Ajax saved his life in battle. What is more, he says,
"Yes, Ajax was a great man, and I too there kept rank, the barbarous mother's servile son. I pity thee the blindness of that word. Who was thy father's father? A barbarian, Pelops, the Phrygian, if you trace him far."
I guess this is another, probably most controversial, theme of the play. It is a critique of the discrimination towards barbarians. The argument, to be clear, is that we all come from barbarians. Our ancestors were all once barbarians. Alas, say what you may, discrimination by way of barbarian culture is nonetheless better than modernity's skin color or inheritance discrimination. If there is any doubt as to whom the good guy is, Odysseus, the ultimate good guy, enters the scene. He asks what the ruckus is all about and is quick to say,
"I cannot blame the man who meets foul speech with bitterness of tongue."
I reckon an aphorism may be crafted out of that. It must be contextualized. I find it inevitable to conclude that Sophocles has Odysseus say this to avoid any criticism of overpassivity. After all, the ensuing debate is on whether it is noble to be ruthless or forgiving towards the folly of another. Sadly, the play could be accused as slave morality propaganda. It could be interpreted so. To be clear, I do not agree with such an interpretation. Such a notion, slave or master morality, is a relative, subjective measure. To some, it is very difficult and challenging to be forgiving. Either way, Odysseus says,
"I, too, had him for my worst enemy, but though he used me so, I ne'er will grudge, that, save Achilles' self, I have not seen, so noble an Argive on the fields of Troy. No hatred should have scope to offend the noble spirits of the dead."
I feel obliged to point out that Nietzsche says, as I remember,
"You should be proud of your enemies, for only thus will their successes also be your own."
I like to say,
You should rejoice in your opponent's successes, as these make your failures more bearable.
either way, the issue at hand is, what is noble? What is true mastery? He who is naturally averse to confrontation and complacent must train to be more adversarial. Likewise, the reverse. For the vengeful.
To become merciful, one must first learn to forgive statues or paintings, then the already dead, then children, then fellow adults, and, at last, God or fate.
I think it funny how Agamemnon shouts in complaint.
"The noble spirit should hearken to command."
Odysseus replies,
"No more. 'Tis triumph to be ruled by love."
Notice how Odysseus proves my understanding. That love requires strength, while Agamemnon speaks of being a follower as being strong. LOL. I just realized, the following lines are also part of a political debate. Agamemnon says to Odysseus,
"We shall be known for weaklings through thy counsel."
but Odysseus replies,
"Not so, but righteous in all Grecian eyes.
That was Pericles' argument. No doubt, this is a political metaphor. Also, remember, Pericles convinces the Athenians to loosen the restrictions by which foreigners and former slaves may become citizens. And no, Pericles was not a tyrant, he was simply the most influential orator. In the end, Agamemnon leaves frustrated, but accepting. Teucer thanks Odysseus' aid. The chorus ends with saying,
Judge not, till the hour have taught thee, what the destinies have brought thee.
That is an aphoristic gem. Remember that this is but part of a series summarizing and analyzing all of Sophocles' surviving plays. You may find many other such series on this channel. Now, as usual, I gift you some more aphorisms based on the text.
To open a bottle of wine is like sleeping with a friend. While it is stored you may flaunt it, but once you taste it, you must consume all of it, for soon it will turn into vinegar.
There is no partner less salubrious than he who is always in agreement.
Since we are all vain, we all envy he who finds a way to justify his vanity.